and a Ramadan Mubarak to you all. Thank you very much for inviting me to come to Oldham and celebrate this very special month that now people feel slipping through their fingers now. We're into we passed through the first half, and now we have these last 15, well, it's the 18th tonight, I think it's coming in, isn't it? It was the 17th night last night, wasn't it? Yeah. And so it was the 17th today, so 18th, it's just about to come in. So and Ramadan is not just about fasting. There's a lot of people, they think, if I'm not fasting, I'm not really gaining benefit from Ramadan. And if they can't fast, they end up feeling guilt. But fasting is just one of the acts of Ramadan, to be honest. And one of the things that we can take from Ramadan is reflecting upon what the Muslims actually achieved in the month of Ramadan. And so we have from many sort of events that happened in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ in the month of Ramadan. So Ramadan wasn't just about collapsing and just getting through it, but the Muslims actually achieved a great deal. And the irony is that many of the things they actually achieved in Ramadan, they weren't fasting. So we see, for example, last night was the commemoration of the Battle of Badr. The Prophet ﷺ purposely broke his fast just before the day before the battle. The day before the battle, to show the people that they need to conserve their energy in order to fight on that day. And also another event that happened, if my memory's Fath al-Mecca, I think it was the 20th, if my memory serves me correctly, I may be wrong on that, is that the Prophet ﷺ entered Mecca and reconquered Mecca, or emancipated it from the slavery of idolatry there. And again, the Prophet ﷺ, he clearly demonstrated that he would not fast that day. And so this is just to stress that Ramadan is not just about fasting, although it's a great act. It's also, there's many other things that Ramadan teaches us, is to what we can achieve and to inspire us with what has been achieved in the month of Ramadan. Many, to the best of my knowledge, and this has just come to me, is that I think even the conquest of Istanbul was in the month of Ramadan as well, if my memory serves me correct. And so we can gain many, Salah ad-Din Ayyubi took back Jerusalem in the month of Ramadan. So Ramadan is a month of openings. And we have, not only that, it's a month in which many of our predecessors who were very blessed passed away. So we have Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha wa alayha salam. She passed away on the 3rd of Ramadan. And we have Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, passed away on the 9th of Ramadan. We have Sayyidah Khadija, who we're going to speak about today inshallah, radiallahu anha wa alayhi salam. She passed away on the 10th of Ramadan. And then we have Salama, the Prophet ﷺ's other wife, who again she's very similar to Khadija radiallahu anha in terms of her wisdom, in terms of devotion to the Prophet ﷺ, and she was a comfort and a strength to him as well, on the 18th of Ramadan. And we have Ali ibn Abi Talib, passed away radiallahu anhu. So this is a month of the Ahlul Bayt. This is a month of those who are closest to the Prophet ﷺ. Allah chose to take their souls in this month. And of course we have the most auspicious night in this month is Laylatul Qadr, the time where we can change our fate. We can change our destiny by turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking for Him for big things in our lives for the coming year. And so it's a real month, especially these last 15 days coming in, it's a real month of opportunity. And it's a lesson for us, is that when we sacrifice in the short term, this is what fasting is all about. It demonstrates when we sacrifice in the short term, we gain so much benefit in the long term. And so when we fast and then we eat that food, after such a long fast, that appreciation we feel, we appreciate that food. And we realize that we get greater reward and a greater experience when we hold back and have resilience and have patience, and that when we really eat that thing, we feel like we're really experiencing life. If you think about it, in the rest of the year we eat out of habit and we don't really appreciate the food that actually goes into our mouths. And so it's a lesson for us that when we sacrifice in the short term, we gain so much in the long term. It's a month of sincerity, it's a month of devotion, and it's a month in trusting in your strengths that God has blessed you with. And this is what we're going to see in the life of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. Allah bestowed on her great blessings, natural dispositions within her, and she played to her strengths, and she gained the glory of this life in the next. And to be honest, after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, her station is unparalleled. Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she has one of the greatest of stations, and this is demonstrated in the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said the greatest woman of her nation, i.e. Of the nation before, was Maryam. So Maryam, she was the greatest woman of her nation. And the greatest nation, and the greatest woman of our nation, of her nation, i.e. the Ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that she was amongst the 4 women who had completed her faith. She was most perfect and complete in her faith. Who are those 4? We have Asiya, and we have Maryam, and we have Khadija, and we have Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anhum ajma'een. May Allah be pleased with them all. It's really interesting that, I think it's really beautiful when we hear these traditions to really contextualize when they were said. The one about who she was the greatest of her nation was actually said to Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was weeping with his daughter after she passed away. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after the days of the embargo upon the Muslims, he was very withdrawn. The Muslims were very worried about him. And Ammar ibn Yasir, he said that he feared that the Prophet ﷺ would pass away from grief. And he would only spend time with Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha, and they would spend time together just grieving over the loss of of her mother. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha, are you not content that you are the lady over all the women of paradise? He said to Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha, are you not content that you will be the greatest of women of paradise? She said, but what about Maryam? Because you'd think the greatest of women, she was granted a prophet as her son, that she would be the greatest, and she was given a miracle that no woman had been given before. But the Prophet ﷺ clarified that she is the greatest woman from amongst her people, but you are the greatest woman from amongst your people. Why? Because she's the daughter of the greatest of women. After Sayyidah Khadija, the greatest of women, Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anhu. So we can see the Prophet ﷺ said these words in order to console his daughter. They're in a moment of grief, and he would say, he would resource her. He would give her positive resource to look, this is not the end. Rather, the end for us is going to be great. Look at the situation they were in. And what's so amazing about Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, she didn't even have to go under the embargo because she wasn't from the tribe of Banu Hashim. She wasn't from his tribe, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so she didn't have to undergo, but she chose to undergo that. And she chose with her wealth as well to support the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslims, and we can probably assert that she probably passed away because of the hardships that she faced in those 2 to 3 years in the embargo. And so it's to say, look at the short-term things look bleak, but you're not looking. You've got to have to look from a grander perspective. Live your story and know that as long as you continue to read your story till your end, till your last breath, and you're still pushing on, that Allah won't fail you. And that's a lesson for all of us in our lives. The only way we can fail in life is to stop reading the story, i.e. our story. What's that mean? That means you've got to keep persevering. It may look bleak in our life sometimes, but in the bleakest hour, Allah's written your story. And do you think the author's got a bad ending for you? The author of your story has not got a bad ending. You just got to keep reading to the end. And when you read to the end, you'll realize that, it all makes sense now. You know those movies you watch and you just think, when you get to the end of the movie, you're like, now it all clicks. And you say, I've got to watch that again now. Just to make sense. That's basically what your life is. It doesn't make sense when you're caught up in the details. But when you get to the end, it all makes sense. And that's what we're going to see about the life of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. So, we know that she was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What's the greatest reason that she's the greatest woman from amongst our ummah is because she had the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's it. When you have the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can rest. But did she rest? That's the reality. So one of the signs that he loved her so much was he only married her. When he was married to Sayyidah Khadija, he married no other woman, and it was very common for the Arabs in their lifetimes to marry have more than one woman. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never forgot mentioning her. He mentioned her so much that Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, she got tired of it because out of her jealousy, because she loved the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she wanted to be like everyone from amongst the Sahaba. They wished to be the most beloved to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said, I was never more jealous of another woman more than Khadija radiallahu anha. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the Sayyidah Aisha one day got really irritated and she said, you've been replaced with better than her, of course. What about me? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no. Why? Because she believed in me when no one else did. She was the first believer to affirm the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's testimony. And we can even say, is that she affirmed the Prophet ﷺ in his moment where he was shocked. She says, there's no way that Allah would ever fail you. So look at that iman of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, her faith. She believed in him when no one else did. She considered him truthful when everyone else was calling him a liar. She gave him of her wealth, and she was the only one to give him children, bar obviously Maria al-Qibtiyya, the Coptic woman. And he would get so excited when her sister would visit. Hala, she survived her sister, when he could hear her gate when she was walking to the door, and the way she tapped on the door, it reminded him of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. He'd go into a state, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of like ecstasy, as if he was Sayyidah Khadija had come alive again. And he would sit with Hala, and they would spend so much time just recollecting the old days, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with Sayyidah Khadija. He never forgot her. And this is a sign of someone who's very special in your life, is that you just don't forget them. And it's important that you don't forget those people who've done things for you. It's important in our lives to recollect and reflect. It's so easy in this day and age to just be focusing on the now and what I've got to do next. And one of the most therapeutic things you can do is to reflect on what the special times you've had in your life. Make a log of what things you've achieved, what Allah's blessed you with. It's really difficult to sort of get into that frame of mind this day and age, because we're just so focused on what we've got to achieve. Got to progress, got to progress. The Prophet ﷺ loved to sit and just reflect on the old days that he had with Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. And he would always this is another very strange quality of the Prophet ﷺ to show how generous he was. He didn't just give gifts to Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha's family, he gave gifts to her friends, and he even gave gifts to people that would come and visit in the lifetime of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. Anyone that reminded him of his wife, he would gift. This was the habit of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever he slaughtered an animal, he would give most of the meat to anyone who was connected to Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha in any way, shape or form. On the Battle of Badr, when the captives were brought, Zainab discreetly radiallahu anha wanted to ransom her husband Abu al-As, who was amongst the captives on the side of the mushrikeen, the idolaters of Quraysh, and because he was fighting on their side. And he was not a Muslim yet, but he was married. He was still the husband of Sayyidah Zainab radiallahu anha. She gifted her mother's necklace that she was given on her wedding day when the Prophet ﷺ, even though it was a joyous occasion that the Muslims had finally defeated their adversaries, when he saw that necklace, he burst into tears. This was the effect that she had on him, radiallahu anha. And what's so amazing as well, when he reconquered Mecca, where did he reside? You'd think he might have resided right next to the Kaaba. This is the house of Allah. But where did he reside? He resided at Hajun. What's Hajun? And this is the sunnah, if you're able to do it, is that when you enter Mecca, you come in from Hujun. And as you pass through Hujun, what's there? Jannatul Mu'alla is where the grave of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, where she is buried. And so the Prophet ﷺ loved to stay by her grave and rest there when he spent his time in Mecca. So this shows the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ of sitting by the righteous, his own wife radiallahu anha, and wishing to be in her company. And when it's the scholars mention this, is that when you visit a city, as long as you haven't got a real taxed for time, is that you go to the graveyard and convey your salams to those people, because generally the graveyards in the old days, they were on the periphery of the town. One of the amazing things about his love for Sayyidah Khadija, I missed this detail out when I was mentioning it, was what Abu Lahab, when he wanted to go and persecute the Prophet ﷺ even more when he'd been pushed out onto the outskirts of Mecca for the 2 or 3 years embargo. This is one of the only times that Abu Lahab, he entered. One was on the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. He had compassion in his heart, Abu Lahab. On another time he had compassion, he walked in on the Prophet ﷺ to persecute him after Sayyidah Khadija had passed away, maybe to just rub it in. But he saw the Prophet ﷺ cried so much that his eyes were bloodshot, that compassion entered his heart, and he just walked away, Abu Lahab. And he even felt that maybe I've done too much and I should resist. But then what happens? That his old cronies come along and say, come on Abu Lahab, you're losing your style. And he went back to persecuting. But just to see the Prophet ﷺ, how grief-stricken the Prophet ﷺ was, he cried so much, almost blood came to his eyes. He was bloodshot, his eyes, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now what's so special about Sayyidah Khadija, one of her unique qualities was, she knew her heritage. She knew that there was something special. What was special? That she was from a family that had people amongst them that were hunafa. Waraqa ibn Nawfal, and to the best of my knowledge, Zayd ibn Amr as well, one of the other hunafa, the 4 people who never worshipped idols, he was related to her as well. And so she felt this yearning to abstain from the idols and to seek the worship of one God. And that's why she was nicknamed At-Tahira, the pure one, because she was from amongst those people that never worshipped the idols, radiyallahu anha wa alayhi salam. And she would sit in the company of Waraqa ibn Nawfal and study with him. But what was unique about Khadija here was that Waraqa, he was able to read and he was able to access the scriptures. But Sayyidah Khadija, she had an innate understanding that the worship of idols was something wrong, and that it was natural to incline to the fitrah, this primordial state, this natural disposition towards the worship of one God. And so she would sit with Waraqa and she would abstain from going to worship the idols. And it's narrated, Allah knows best about this narration, it's related from Ibn Abbas, that one day a Jewish man came into the town and there was a big festival, and he came towards the women and he went into a state of ecstasy, this Jewish man. He said, a prophet will come from amongst you, so if any of you women live to see that time, then glad tidings to the one from amongst you that gets to marry him. And it's said that Sayyidah Khadija, this had a real impact on her heart, and she felt as if it was her legacy, she felt that it was her destiny to maybe find that person and to be married to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's important for every one of us to know that we're destined for something special. I always say, I don't know what I always say, but it's weird. I remember when I was young, before I was Muslim, I used to lie on my bed and think, I'm destined for great things. Okay, God's got something for me. I think I had delusions of grandeur, but but the thing is, it's important, I think, for every person to feel that no matter where you're born, if you're born in the rough ghettos of Oldham, I visited them today. Okay, is that it does not matter. There's something there, as long as you read your story and you persevere. The fact that you've been given La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, that's a proof straight away that Allah wants something great for you. You've just got to search out what it is, because every one of us has unique different strengths and different weaknesses. Some people may see they have weaknesses, but they don't realize also they've got strengths that other people do not have. And it's just for us to dig and find that within us. Now, So she knew that there was something special about her, and she knew there was something special about her family, and she knew that there was something destined for her. And then she married, radiallahu anha, and she married twice. Very young she married, and she married twice, and both of her husbands passed away. And her father, it said in the Battle of Fijar, which is a famous battle when the Prophet ﷺ was still quite young, he passed away. And so because of this, she was in a unique position. She inherited a great amount of wealth, radiallahu anha, which was very rare for women in that day, for women to have vast wealth, because they generally didn't inherit women. In fact, they were inherited. The men inherited them as if they were wealth, but she inherited a vast amount of wealth. There were other two women in history that I'm aware of that inherited vast wealth through their brothers and their father and their husbands passing away early in their lifetime. Was Fatima al-Fihriya and Maryam al-Fihriya, who established the two mosques in Fez, where I lived for many years, Jami' al-Qarawiyyin and Jami' al-Andalus. And which was to be the first university in the world that was established by these women folk, these two sisters, because of this wealth. And this teaches us a great lesson here, is that our wealth, two lessons here. When we're given wealth, first of all, we see it as a trust given to us by Allah, and we have to dispatch it in a way that is fitting, because wealth passes on. When we pass away, that wealth goes on to someone else. So it's important that we invest in it, and it's important that we utilize it in a way that we're going to see the fruits of it in the next life. Another lesson about inheritance money is that we don't sit on it. I'm not criticizing saving. That's not a bad thing, saving. But an issue came up, and this is a difference in fiqh, is that some of the scholars say zakat, there is zakat even on a child's wealth. So say an orphan inherited a lot of money. This is in the Maliki school. If an orphan inherits a lot of money, then you'll still zakat on it. And I remember one person saying, well, that's not fair. If he inherits the wealth, he's not going to be able to, use it, and he's just going to lose. Each year he's losing money. Does that make sense? And one of my teachers said to me, no, this is a lesson that you're supposed to invest that orphan's money. Muslims are not people that just sit on wealth. Muslims are always looking, how do I invest in this money in order for it to grow? Because you never know what the future brings. And so Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, what did she do with her wealth? She didn't sit on it, rather she invested in it, whereby she became one of the most wealthiest, not just women, but the wealthiest people in the whole of Mecca. They say that her caravans that she sent out, that she would have, they would be the most successful caravans, and they would be the largest caravans. But she had a dilemma. What time do I need to wrap up, Arshad? Allahu Akbar. Okay? That you're supposed to give me a 5-minute tap on the left foot or something. So but she had a dilemma. What was her dilemma, Sayyidah Khadija? The men who used to take her wealth and trade with it were corrupt, and they would take larger portions of her wealth than they had right to. And so she had a need. She was in a privileged position, but she had a need. And that's when Allah answered her need. And how was it answered? Is that she found out through her sister, who had a large amount of flock of sheep, she had the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam tending to her sheep, and she recognized that he was a just right man. And this is a huge lesson. Sayyidah Khadija heard he was a just right man, but she didn't suffice herself with just that information. What did she do next? She sent him on trade and said, you do with that wealth as you wish, and you'll get so she didn't condition him strictly. She says, but if you make profit, you'll get a third of that wealth. And so what was she blessed with? The Prophet also made three times more than she would have normally have made. And so that shows that when you put a trust in righteous people, you only get back. Even though the Prophet ﷺ didn't have experience, and this is a huge lesson in business and in any sphere of our life, if you want to have a successful business, it's not about how much money. You can't buy successful people. I've got the money, and I can basically, you're my servant. It's that sort of attitude. But we don't realize sometimes how blessed we are to have righteous and noble people working for us, and we're benefiting from them just as much as we are benefiting from them. And if we put our trust in them, like Sayyidah Khadija, you get loyalty from your workers. But if you think you've just bought them, yes, they're going to basically cheat. They're going to, the moment the opportunity they get, they're going to leave you, and they're going to set up a business and rival you. That's what happens. You've got to be investing in our people. And when we see youngsters from amongst us that they might not have experience, but they've got qualities, that we invest in them and we encourage them and realize they're an asset just as much to us as we are to them. And we shouldn't try to control them. Rather, we should try to enhance them and benefit from them. So this, and it's the test, and I have to wrap up on this, is that Sayyidah Khadija, how did she deal with this? She wanted to test to see the Prophet ﷺ for herself what his qualities were. And so that doesn't mean we always go on people's word. So if we want to marry someone, if we want to invest in someone, do business with someone, if we want to do a project with someone, it's important that we test them. Okay, not just to go on people's word, but see them, not necessarily experience, but because we believe them to be righteous, but to check on them to see how they are. And we might get our hand bitten once, but we learn from that. But once we see that this person is sincere and they are dedicated and they have that purpose and the skills, that we put our full trust in them and we give as much as we can to invest in them so they can grow. And that's what, after that, Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha never looked back from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She had absolute surety about him in every sphere and every matter, so that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came back from Hira, she gave absolute faith that she had no doubt about him, that Allah would never fail him. When he wanted to go to, even before that, when he wanted to go to the cave, and it said that some women were questioning her, saying, you let your husband go up there. But when you know you've got a husband or you've got a wife that has purpose, you encourage them. So if you have a wife that's maybe got more skills than you are and wants to achieve things, you encourage her. When you've got a husband that's got skills, you know that they've got a good heart and you know they're trying to do things, you give as much as you can for them, believe in them. That's what's the most important. But you don't give your absolute trust to them if they're a bum. If you know that they are going to basically exploit you, and you're just going on words that people say, yeah, they're a good guy, or they're a good woman. No, you have to test them. But once you've established that, then you encourage them. You encourage your children, you encourage your husband, you encourage your wives, you encourage the people, and you put your full trust in them with your capacities so they can grow and great people, and then they only come back on you. That benefit only comes back on you. And Sayyidah Khadija, what benefit did she get? She got to have, as the Prophet ﷺ, as Sayyidah Jibreel said about her, is that she has a house in paradise made of pearl, where she will never hear any noise and she will never toil again. And so with what she invested, she got back, and she gets the company of the Prophet ﷺ for eternity in the highest stations of paradise. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we get to be in the company of both of them on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah.